So the civics test is where they ask you the 10 questions out of possible 100 questions, which has now become 128 possible questions, where they ask you 20. So the old version of the test, they ask you 10 questions. You need to get 60% correct. Now, as of October 2025, they ask you 20 questions and you need to get 12 correct. So still 60%. And the pool of questions has increased. About 75% of the questions are the same, but there are some new questions now as well. Hey guys, welcome back. So I recently attended an N400 naturalization interview in the Queens, New York City field office, and I took extensive notes and thought I would make a video to help anyone who's going through this process or who's becoming a permanent resident and is considering citizenship in the future or is eligible for naturalization now. Before I get into it, I just want to say something I've said in a lot of my videos is that if you qualify for naturalization, I think it's a good idea to file now. The process has already become harder than it was a few months ago, and we expect way more changes in the upcoming year. So you might be able to get your application in now. If you qualify, it's not going to get easier, at least for the next few years until the Trump administration's gone, and then who knows what'll happen. So anyway, I attended this interview with my client. The interview started at 9:15, which is an hour after it was supposed to start. So we were waiting for an hour in the waiting room, but that's actually not that bad. So the officer that we spoke with had a bit of an accent, but she was very friendly. And the reason I mention this is because some people who are applying for naturalization don't speak English perfectly. And if your English is iffy, first of all, you need to demonstrate to the officer that you speak English fluently. And the problems arise when you don't understand the officer because of like a heavy accent. Luckily in this case, her accent wasn't that heavy and she was very friendly. So I started the interview by telling the officer that we had uploaded some amendments. So the officer stopped the interview for a second, reviewed those, and then thanked us for uploading the amendments. She said that it made the interview easier and made her job easier during the interview. She started the interview by putting my client under oath, and then we moved right into the civics test first, followed by the reading and writing test. So the civics test is where they ask you the 10 questions out of possible 100 questions, which has now become 128 possible questions, where they ask you 20. So the old version of the test, they ask you 10 questions. You need to get 60% correct. Now, as of October 2025, they ask you 20 questions and you need to get 12 correct. So still 60%. And the pool of questions has increased. About 75% of the questions are the same, but there are some new questions now as well. So these are the specific questions that the immigration asked during this interview. What are the two parts of the US Congress? Client answered House of Representatives and Senate. How many justices are on the Supreme Court? Client answered 9. What is the rule of law? And the client answered everybody must follow the law. What did Martin Luther King Jr. do? Answer, fought for civil rights. What is the highest court in the US? Supreme Court. And why does the flag have 50 stars? Each star represents one state. So these were the first 6 questions. Client got the first 6 right. This part of the test is over because he already achieved 60%. Now, anyone watching this video, the new version of the test will be in effect. So you would need to get the first 12 questions right for this part of the test to be over. Next, the officer asked the client to read a sentence. The sentence was, who lives in the White House? And then the officer asked the client to write a sentence. And that sentence was, the president lives in the White House. For those of you who've subscribed to my channel, I made a video like this a few weeks ago for another N400 interview, and I think it's interesting that the immigration officer asked the client to read the exact same question and write the exact same sentence. It was, who lives in the White House? The president lives in the White House. So this might just be something that they're doing for the next few weeks. These two interviews were pretty close together in time, so that might help somebody who has an interview scheduled now, but unlikely. These things change from time to time. Okay, the officer next asked if my client would like to change his name. And then the officer went through a lot of the N400 application, asked a lot of questions. How tall are you? What's your phone number? Where do you live? The officer asked about a specific trip that the client had taken and wanted to clarify if it was plane travel or on a cruise. Asked my client if any of the parents are US citizens, confirmed that my client has a certain number of children, and then asked my client like literally 30 of the yes or no questions. You know, have you ever registered to vote? Do you owe any taxes? Have you ever sold weapons? Do you have any military service? The officer literally said this question where she combined 3 questions. Have you ever been engaged in prostitution, assassination, or hijacking? Have you ever threatened anyone with a weapon? What about torture? What about genocide? Have you ever killed anyone? These are literally what the officer asked. And then just kept going down the list. Like a lot of the yes or no questions, the officer just repeated. And it seemed like the officer was just trying to be thorough. Okay, so we got to the end of the interview and the officer clarified that she is recommending this applicant be approved for naturalization, but that the oath ceremony will not be today. So I asked the officer, and this might be the most interesting part of this video, under what circumstances will you do the oath ceremony on the same day? Because in some field offices, people are more likely to be scheduled for a same-day oath ceremony. It's still pretty unlikely in most of the United States. What I tell my clients is that 3 conditions generally need to be met. USCIS needs to have finished its background checks on you. The immigration officer during the interview must recommend your case for approval and must not require any additional documents from you. If they need more stuff, they're going to issue a request for evidence and it's going to delay the process. And a swearing-in ceremony has to be available that day. I tell people if these 3 conditions are met, you might have the option to take the ceremony that day. So I asked the officer, can my client take the swearing in ceremony today? I know there's one scheduled later in the day. I spoke to a security guard earlier, and I know at 2 p.m. today there will be a ceremony in this building. And the officer said that in the Queens field office, they only do same-day oaths if there's a disability, pregnancy, or if the person has to travel back due to some extenuating circumstances. For example, they're in college and they need to travel back. They just came in for the interview. And the officer also mentioned that different USCIS offices do it differently. So anyway, guys, if you're going to the Queens field office and you don't have some sort of disability or extenuating circumstance, it's actually very unlikely that you're going to be sworn in on that day. But in this case, my client and I went back to the filing window right after the interview and we got a swearing in oath date for 2 weeks out. So still pretty fast, still a happy story. And I hope this video helps someone along the way. All right, guys, that's it for today's video. If you want to stay up to date on what's happening, hear directly from an immigration attorney that's giving you his perspective from the ground, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I try to put out a couple of videos on this week that I think my audience would enjoy and that might help people who are going through their immigration journeys. If you yourself need any assistance with a green card application, naturalization, removing conditions, work permits, deportation defense, I handle all of that stuff, so you should schedule a consultation directly with me if you need an attorney. My consultation information and direct booking link are in the YouTube video description below, or you can go to my website, GaryandLaw.com, to schedule a consultation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time for another video.